Oh, morning, Trainiacs. That there was the first run back since we got in from Puerto Rico. That was like a real feel-good kind of run. I don't know what it was. Maybe just being outside, sun in my eyes. That hasn't happened months. Well, actually, there's a lot of sun in my eyes in Puerto Rico. I'm just days away from starting the build-up to Challenge Roth and the project with Dan Plews about becoming more fat-adapted, increasing the fat oxidation levels. We had a call last night, and it's starting. Well, officially my legs were not ready to run. They were feeling good yesterday. They are sore today after that. Wow. I immediately regretted that. Alright, so if you missed the last video that we did with Dan Plews, I'll link to it at the end, but Dr. Dan Plews is A, doctor, B, a sports scientist specifically researching and publishing dozens of papers, being cited in I think over hundreds of papers about endurance sports performance research, specifically HIIT training, HRV training, and for the purposes of this chat, low carb, high fat endurance training. He also coaches Terenzo Bizzone, and he's coached I think 3 pro athletes to under 8-hour Ironman finishes. Most notably, however, well, actually, if you talk to him, he's like, I find it fairly annoying that that's what people care about. But he won Kona in 2018. He was the amateur that set the all-time Kona course record, going 8:24 and running I think it was the 5th fastest marathon of the day in 2:50. That's how we ended up meeting him. Now, why this is all so interesting to me is because I started doing research after having Dan on the podcast, and there were studies that show that the ability to improve your fat oxidation, basically access fat as fuel in endurance sports, plays as much as a 50% role in the variation in your performance. So I reached out to Dan, and he is helping me become more fat adapted for Challenge Roth. There, now you're updated. So Dan is acting as like a bit of a coach, consultant sort of thing in leading up to Challenge Roth, and he's already started helping me with some of my dieting. I've had instant results.
And have you, how's your eating been? What have you been doing on that front?
So I went, I think it was 7 or 8 days with eating a little bit earlier and the evening salads after you suggested that, and that consistently kept my fasting blood glucose low right away, and it held there.
Well, that's good, because it seems like I knew what I was talking about then, eh?
Yeah, Dan said that I should try having just a salad for dinner, eating a little bit earlier at night. I have been monitoring my fasting blood glucose for the last few months, and in the week after I made nothing but that one change, fasting blood glucose levels were lower than they have ever been. So there are some nuances to going low carb. It's not just eating less carbs. Look at this.
So I think now it's time. I think you can still keep on that a little bit of carb, but what you need to do is just keep those carbs to like only in that red and orange and green list that I sent you. So no bread, none of that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
just keep it to more kind of what we like to call the healthy carbs.
So not all carbs are created equal, despite what a lot of the charlatans out there say, where a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. That's not actually the case. I've seen significant differences in my fasting blood glucose, whether I have rice or pizza or sweet potatoes. So there's actually, if you didn't get this already, go to triathlontaren.com/theplews, and you'll get a free, basically, how to start low carb, high fat training that Dan has put together for free for all of you. And there is a list of the good foods, the great foods, like green, orange, red, like good foods. Next thing I learned, and this is where Dan is going to be also training me a little bit as a consultant on the actual workouts, is that I learned last night that it's not just about going low carb.
And just on the training side, I'm just thinking about it a little bit more, and like, the best way to tackle it, because like it or not, the food, the diet's one thing, but the training plan's another, and they're both critical to having a good race at Roth. So I just want to make sure that we're ticking all the boxes and kind of leaving those 7 and 10 and actually covering off the training side as well. It's not that I don't trust that you're going to give yourself the best training plan, but I think like the combination of diet and the plan is important, and like it'll be quite hard for you to know how to do them both at the same time, because you've not really done it before.
So he's going to help with some of that, and I think what we're going to be doing is there are going to be periods where we focus on including the intense stuff, even though carbs are a little bit low, to overcome some of the challenges of low carb, high fat training. And there will be some particular moments where I do specific efforts that are fasted or just on like a fat-based coffee, a butter coffee. I'm not entirely sure. Stay tuned for that. Now, bottom line, you have to be careful with everything that you read on here online. I've talked about it in the past, and what I was finding is we're starting to go down a path that low carb, high fat training, it's fairly dangerous. If you don't get it right, you will A, not get the results, and B, you could potentially mess up your hormones. There's a lot to it. And Dan, I like this, like me, then Dan, then me, then Dan. He actually had like a very classy way of explaining this with music.
It's like I've said before, like you can tell people the notes, the musical notes, but it's the order and it's the order of which you put them and the time in between that makes them music. The main aim is that we just want to show you, give them some snippets along the journey.
So now why Dan agreed to all this is because he thinks that it's important to document the journey, and we're going to be starting with some testing. I'm going to go into the lab, and what we are looking to do is basically duplicate a journey that he took an athlete called Matt Kerr on between the end of December and just the end of February, where Matt Kerr, get this, Matt Kerr started out as a complete sugar burner, so much so that basically, unless he was going under 135 watts on the bike, he was not burning any fat. And then when they modeled that and said, all right, here's how much fat you're burning, here's how much sugar you're burning, even if you take in enough calories, you will run out of fuel around 3 hours and 50 minutes to 4 hours and 20 minutes slogging through the end of your races. Pretty scary if you're doing a 8, 9, 12 hour Ironman. What they did with Matt was they took him through a 8-week fat adaptation protocol where in that period of time they improved his ability to oxidize fat so much so that when he went and raced 8 weeks later at Ironman New Zealand, he was able to, as they modeled with the same testing, he was able to hold 270 watts for 8 to 9 hours before running out of fuel. The results were the very first Ironman that he did, and just the third triathlon that he ever did, was 9 hours and 21 minutes, finishing 10th overall. This is his first Ironman race, and here's the really notable thing. He was sitting at 20th place overall right up until the last 14 kilometers of the marathon, when, because he was still bonk free, still oxidizing fat, just clipping along. His pace dipped slightly, but not nearly as much as all of his competitors. And over the course of those last 14 kilometers, just moved up from 20th to 19th to 18th to 17th, all the way up to 10th place because he just stayed smooth. Now granted, Matt was a very talented athlete. In his, I think, first half Ironman race, he did a 4:28 at Taupo 70.3, but it's not just Matt that's doing this. It's Terenzo Bazone, it's Jan van Berkel, it's Dan Plews himself. And if you look at Dan Plews' performance in Kona, he basically even split the marathon. There was no fade whatsoever. Every 10K split was 40 minutes on the nose. So this is seeming very legit, but you have to do it right, which is why I'd say go to triathlontaren.com/theplews and just start wrapping your head around what the best people in the world do to make sure that this is safe, properly done, and you get the most out of it. On that note, I'm gonna go nurse my legs. They're really sore. Go check it out, Trainiacs, triathlontaren.com/theplews. Thanks the Plews too, helping me out. This is super interesting and I'm looking forward to it. Maybe not the intense efforts that we do when I'm trying to be keto. Later, Trainiacs.